let's get sweaty.
Hey guys, welcome to the Shenmue Dojo 2023 end of year review. We did one last year and James and I liked it so much, we're going to do it again this year. Different year for Shenmue, quite a turbulent year I would say for Shenmue, but lots of things and bits and pieces for us to discuss. But before I dive into what we're going to discuss, James man, how you doing?
Hello, I'm doing alright, thanks man. Happy holidays everyone. It's that time of year, towards the end of the year. Looking forward to 2024, I guess, in a sense. Like, not looking forward to it as in, like, I'm really looking forward to it, but, like, looking forward as in it's on the horizon and sort of heading there. But, yeah, it'd be interesting to see what happens in this upcoming year. But, yeah, how are you doing, Matt? You okay?
Yeah, all good. I need to get in the gym. I ate far too much at Christmas, and I'm paying for it now, big time.
I think everyone does, don't they? Gym memberships skyrocket in January.
It'd be hell in there in January. Yep. Yeah, it's going to be madness. Just before I go into the topics we're going to cover, I'm going to caveat something very quickly. At this point of recording, we haven't had the end of year messages from the developers out over in Japan. So like Famitsu, Fangame normally do those interviews with the developers in Japan. So what they're looking forward to, a review of their year. It hasn't come out yet. If it does, before this video releases, then you'll probably find that we'll do another video before this one's come out to cover that topic to make sure we've got all bases covered. But yeah, it'd be typical that we record this and then when the next day comes along, they release them all and then another video has to be done on the quick. But there we go. It is what it is, and that's just symptomatic of whenever we do a podcast and we do some news, more news comes out.
Always happens.
But there we go. Diving in, topics that we're going to cover. There's quite a few. We'll just sort of talk through them as we go, bounce around each other, ideas around it, and then we'll have some final thoughts at the end. So the topics we're going to cover are Air Twister, obviously the release from Wisenet this year. We're going to talk about the interview Yu Suzuki did with Esra Krabbe around Shenmue 4, Shenmue 0, and also his career as a retrospective of his career in the games industry. That will segue into Lucca Games, which was the Italian game and comic conference. It was held around October-November time this year. We're also going to look at the Cedric Biscay tweet that came out this year as well around Shenmue 4 crowdfunding and pitch materials. That definitely got people talking a little bit, I think. Yeah. We're going to talk about Adam Scipione's documentary, A Gamer's Journey, the definitive history of Shenmue, that finally hit our hands at the early part of this year. Fantastic documentary. We're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about Shenmue's rankings in some magazines that have been published over the year as well, and how it's sort of kept Shenmue in the news. Then we're going to dive into a more recent piece of news, which is the Dreams of Saturn Fangame by George Kitchen, which is fantastic. If you haven't played that, the link will be in the description below, so you can download that for yourselves and check that out. And then we're going to talk a little bit around sort of the Sega new era stuff, or the IP they're reviving, Virtua Fighter, and how that can influence how we push to get Shenmue 4, Shenmue 0, and just the continuation of the Shenmue series, and make sure that it stays in people's minds going forward into 2024, which I think is going to be a very important year for Shenmue, which I'll come on to at the end. So,
great summary, Matt.
Buckle in. Hopefully you'll enjoy this, guys. We're looking forward to it. We're going to go straight in, James, into Air Twister. Air Twister was announced to be coming to consoles on November the 10th this year. It was announced on June 27th. It's had a multi-platform release across PC, Switch, Xbox, and PlayStation. James is holding up there the Japanese Switch Collector's Edition, the UK Switch Edition as well. You can get it base copies from Amazon, etc. in the UK, or through in games and strictly limited games. You can get collector's editions as well. Check those out if you haven't done so already. James, Air Twister, busy time for us. Really, really busy time for us. I think we both said it was almost like a trial run for a Shenmue game being released in terms of the coverage that we put out. What did you think of Air Twister? What did you think of the coverage? And did you need to lie down afterwards?
Definitely, like I say, it's a good test run, and it's also a good thing to be pushing anyway, because obviously it's a WiseNet produced game. So obviously any income coming from that is going to go towards future titles, of which we know one is already in development or ready to be released. The Yu Suzuki mentioned, we'll talk about a little bit later, that he mentioned to Esra. But then that could also lead into Shenmue, hopefully Shenmue 4, Shenmue 0 that he's talking about. So I think it was good to cover the game as much as we did, give it as much coverage and push it as much as possible. Incidentally, the reason I've got 2 Switch copies there is because I've ordered the strictly limited games PS5 edition.
Yeah.
So that's coming sometime in April, is it? Or March, April time, I think.
It's Q1, isn't it? 2024.
Q1. So yeah, okay. So yeah, that's coming soon as well. So definitely check that out if you haven't got that yet. But in terms of the game, the shift from a mobile device onto, well, another mobile device if you're playing on the Switch, but it's also available on the PS5, PC, Xbox. So having all these different types of platform to play what was an Apple exclusive title is just great for everyone involved. I've seen nothing but positive reviews for it from old school Sega fans of Space Harrier, Panzer Dragoon. So if that floats your boat, definitely check it out. I loved it. I was playing it on the Switch, which I think is possibly the best way to play it. So you've got sort of the touchscreen mechanics that you had from the Apple device that it was designed for originally, along with now being able to use thumbstick controls. So you can actually move Princess Arch, who's like the main character, around the screen with the left thumbstick, whilst dragging your finger across the screen to target enemies and destroy them. So it works. It's like a match made in heaven, really, that control system. I haven't actually tried it on the PS5 yet, because obviously I'm waiting for that edition to arrive. But that is where you played it, Matt. How did you find the control system so far on that?
So I played it on PC, and I was quite lucky that.
Oh yeah, PC you did. Sorry, yeah.
We were quite lucky that through Inning Games and their PR company that we managed to get a review code for this, which made our coverage a hell of a lot easier. And thank you to Ed over at Inning Games and Derek at PR Hound as well for allowing that to happen.
Guys.
And WiseNet have been really open with us around the game as well, and been really supportive of the coverage we've put out. So again, thank you so much. I think it translated to controller quite well, having played it on the Apple TV version, which I said this at the time was the lowest of the low version in terms of what it was, in terms of resolution, in terms of frame rate, all the rest of it. So coming over to PC, I had the benefit of 60 frames per second locked, really smooth controls, and really enjoyed the game. I think overall it translates to a controller really, really well. There are some sort of, I guess, artifacts from it being a mobile game, with some like mini games like Tap Breaker. You can tell that was designed for a mobile phone. Not that it plays badly or anything. I just think it lends itself better to the touchscreen type of control, which if you're then playing on the Nintendo Switch, I think that's where that game would come into its own. That mini game would come into its own. The game itself, I really enjoyed. Practically bug-free, pretty flawless actually in that regard. Old school shooter, Panzer Dragoon, Space Harrier type game. It's one of those games that you can drop in for 20 minutes, half an hour, when you go, got some time to kill, what do I want to do? Drop in, shoot some aliens, see how far you can get, and then from that you again sort of open up the map and all the additional content, the lore. It's actually a surprisingly deep game with all the lore, the things you can unlock as well. I think it was a bit of a sleeping title in some respects. I think people who've come across it by accident actually quite enjoy it, but it's gone under the radar in terms of probably mainstream gaming a little bit. But hopefully that's where some of the coverage that we've been able to provide, I know other people have picked it up and done coverage as well, has sort of pushed it out there a bit more as well. I think the Shenmue community have really enjoyed it. You said old school Sega fans have pretty much picked it up and really liked it as well. And it's every sale is money in the coffers at WiseNet for either future projects or towards Shenmue 4 or Shenmue 0 or whatever. So I was really pleased with it. And hopefully they can make more sorts of titles like this. We need more titles like this in gaming, in my view, because you're getting all these 60-hour epics all the time, everywhere. And actually, sometimes it's quite nice to sit down and just play a game for half an hour, 40 minutes, and then go and do something else and not be dragged into a 60-hour epic, which by the end of it, you're crawling. This feels like you can sort of dip in and out as you want and not have to remember story, controls, or anything. So that's quite nice.
Matt. I mean, thinking back to when I was a child and I used to have my Game Gear, I used to take it on journeys in the car, like traveling to somewhere. It takes an hour to get to Birmingham, for example. On that journey, I'd be playing on my Game Gear, and it's that kind of a game where you just sit down, you just play it for like 20 minutes or whatever, like you're saying there. And I think Air Twister lends itself to being able to do that on the Nintendo Switch. You can obviously, kids, I'm sure, are taking the Switches on the bus, or playing at a break at school perhaps, or something like that. And it's I'm not sure if it's the type of game that a kid would want to play, but it's accessible enough that I think people can get an enjoyment from it. Be interesting to find out actually what a child's response is to that type of game. If it's because obviously, like you say, you don't see these types of games anymore. It's only like people like us that have grown up with Space Harrier and Panzer Dragoon that have these sort of on-rail shooter type games. Be interesting to get the thoughts of a child on that actually.
A modern gamer's take would be very
modern gamer's
interesting.
Take, yeah.
A very interesting take on it, because I think modern gamers, and I am generalising, I don't, just take this with a pinch of salt, but modern gamers generally, I think, more lean towards your multiplayer Call of Duty type things or your big story epics. The arcade type titles, I don't think, again, generalising, probably haven't been exposed to as much. Whereas, as you said, we grew up with this sort of gaming. It's where gaming really started for us. So it's a complete contrast. I think somebody growing up with gaming now and what they've experienced to what we experienced, I'd be very interested to see what that view is on something like that.
Yeah, for sure. And I've seen quite a lot of people that I wouldn't expect to be talking about it like you're watching YouTube videos of random people that talk about retro games and stuff, and then they bring up Air Twister, and in games have sent me this, or I've seen this on Strictly Limited and I've picked it up, which is nice to see. So it is finding its way out there somehow, and I can also kind of see it perhaps popping up on the PS Store at some point, the PS Now, PS Plus, and your Xbox Game Pass. I could see it becoming one of those sort of games, like you say, it's just like a sleeper hit that'll pop up one day and it'll get a little bit of a buzz from it because it's a free to download and play game. I could see that becoming a case, once it's out there on those sort of platforms. So hopefully we can see something like that happen actually.
Yeah, definitely, and I'd be very interested to see sort of how it's performed from a sales perspective. I don't know if we'll ever get numbers out or anything like that, but hopefully it's done well for Inin, it's done well for WiseNet, and that relationship there, which seems quite positive as well, from sort of speaking to Inin and speaking to WiseNet about it as well. We had the pleasure, actually, part of the Air Twister coverage, to do a written interview with Yu Suzuki around Air Twister as well, and I think that relationship was alluded to there as being quite a healthy one. So I'm hoping that then has led into some good sales and they can continue to work together as well. Because I think actually
seemed really positive about it. Like when Flagship interviewed, I forget the bloke's name off the top of my head. Simon, yeah. Very, very excited about being involved with the title from Yu Suzuki, I think, as well. Sort of the passionate old school gamer in their staff. Obviously,
definitely.
Excited about it themselves. So that sort of drives their want to market it and have it be a success as well, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And working with a legend like Yu Suzuki as well, I think it has its merits in that regard as well. And while I think the Yu Suzuki name probably doesn't carry the credence with modern gamers so much, and that's a travesty in itself, which we'll come on to later on, I think for a certain age range of gamers, everybody knows Yu Suzuki and how pioneering he was with games. So I think seeing him making games again outside of Shenmue is we all want Shenmue 4, etc. But seeing him make other games that he's clearly passionate about is great to see. And actually that segues us in a little bit here to the next topic, which is Shenmue 4, Shenmue 0. Hot topics of debate. I've done videos around Shenmue 0 this year as well, and whether it's something that could work, couldn't work, and that debate around it, what I'd want to see from a Shenmue 4, how they should launch it. It's been quite, there's been some in-depth analysis from us on this. But earlier this year, as part of sort of the celebration of Yu Suzuki's career, bearing in mind he's been in the industry 30 to 35 years now, which is insane. Absolutely insane amount of time in the industry. He did a really big sit-down interview with Esra Krabbe, is massive Shenmue fan, works for IGN Japan, going through his career, going through bits and pieces about Shenmue and what's next for Yu Suzuki as well. And then it came into Shenmue and Shenmue 4, and predictably there's going to be a Shenmue 4 question in there. It has to be.
Yeah.
And Yu Suzuki talked a little bit about wanting to have like playable flashbacks in Shenmue 4, and it's still in his thought process at the moment. He's waiting for the opportunity to do it. But I'd argue the bigger piece of news out of that was the talk of a Shenmue 0.
Yeah.
Where do you sit on that, James? And what did you think about it when Yu Suzuki sort of talked about the idea and how it could potentially work and what his idea was for it?
I'm excited by it. And thinking back to what he's saying about the playable flashbacks with Shenmue 4, they could come hand in hand, really. If he creates a Shenmue 0, a fresh, modern take on Dobuita, and then he's got those assets and those areas created to then be able to make a playable flashback of, say, something that happened in the first game, because it's there in Shenmue 0, for example. It would need to be tailored well in terms of story, because I forget what he said exactly about the Shenmue 0 aspects, but it sounded like he was thinking more in terms of Rio again.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, whereas obviously when we talk about Shenmue 0 and you spoke about it in your video, it would seem to work the best from the point of view of a WoW, and then we could follow a WoW's footsteps, what led him to China, what happened between him and Zhao Sunming, what happened with the mirrors, why did he bring them back to Japan, etc., what happened in that relationship there, maybe what happened to his mother, Rio's mother, maybe they could touch upon that a little bit, leading up to obviously then the start of Shenmue 1, where you've got this mystery involving the mirror and why Landy's so passionate about retrieving it and taking revenge on his own father by killing WoW. So they could set that up really nicely and then introduce people into the story of Shenmue essentially by covering that aspect, as long as it doesn't go too spoiler heavy for the future of the series, because obviously we still want to get Shenmue 4 and beyond. You don't want Shenmue 0 to sort of spoil everything and then make a Shenmue 4 less sort of desired in that sense. But from the point of view of Rio, I'm not quite sure how they would do it. They would potentially have to go down the route of like the start of the anime series, where Rio's in the Kung Fu tournament. Maybe he's a very young martial artist in that sense, but overcoming high school, college type folk that are on a similar sort of level as him, and sort of introducing maybe his friends, Nozomi, these sort of character relationships that he seems to be breaking in Shenmue because he's so set on revenge. How he's sort of breaking up the whatever relationship he had with Nozomi because he's seemingly doesn't care about her at the moment because he's hell set on finding Landy. So that'd be nice to sort of have like what happened prior to the events of Shenmue, where Rio's going around talking to his friends, talking to people, shop owners, Nozomi, and seeing that side of things. But again, is there enough there to create a full game's worth of story? I can't really see what else, because they can't really set up another villain because the villain is Landy, isn't it? There's no villain before Landy, so I can't really see how it would work. Rio's side of things. What do you think about that, Matt?
I think it's tricky, the Rio side of things, and you summarised that really, really well, actually, in that Rio's backstory, I don't think lends itself. I could be wrong. There could be somebody who's got a really massive idea around how this could work. But from where I'm sitting, and I think from what you said as well, to make that sort of an epic story that would entice people into the series, I don't know if Rio's backstory is enough. If they could intertwine Rio's backstory with a WoW's backstory, for example, so that could work potentially. Yeah. So you have the main focus is on a WoW, but could there be playable sequences with Rio, for example? We know a WoW is a strict father, but also a very caring, loving father. So within those sequences, could you not establish the relationship between the two, for example, and sort of make that, almost join the two ideas together, and then make that work? I don't think Rio on his own is enough to make it work. Personally, I could be very wrong on that, and I'm happy to be proven wrong on that. I think a WoW's story and the backstory of the mirrors, Zhao Zhongmin, what happened in China, what happened in Bailu Village, it lends itself more in terms of establishing those plots, establishing those characters, establishing essentially the trajectory of the story to then entice people to go, what happens now? And then play Shenmue 4. That for me would be the more obvious route to go. And sometimes the things that staring you right in the face is probably the best way to go. But obviously we're not the creators of the game. This is just two people having a chat around it. And my view is quite strong on it. I think it should be the WoW side of things, or a combination of the two if they can make it work. And then, if, like you say, it feeds into a Shenmue 4 potentially, that if they have assets from a Shenmue 0 for playable flashbacks, you obviously got Dweeta, you could have that there ready to go. You could then start thinking about leaning into the Shenmue 2 side of things and some of the flashbacks there. Shenmue 3 side of things, bearing in mind they've already got the engine for that, so that's, they're done, ready to go. And then hopefully you can entice new people into a Shenmue 4 through that way. I know there's also sort of talk in the community about the need for a Shenmue Kiwami, like a proper official Shenmue Kiwami. I don't know if that'll ever happen. That's something we might talk about towards the end of this video. And what Sega's plans are going forward in terms of their broad sort of strategy. But it was exciting, I think, sort of going back to the topic, to hear Yu Suzuki talking about Shenmue 4 and what he wants to do with that. And those playable flashbacks, actually, I think are a really good idea, because then someone can go in not having had prior knowledge of the game, but they can put in the key story points in there as flashbacks. You play them, and then you build that affiliation to the characters, and then you sort of caught up as you play. It makes a lot of sense. There'd be natural points for something like that as well. When you think, hypothetically, in Shenmue 4, if we meet Zimming, well, there you go. You've got Zimming. We know he's the sister, he's the brother of Zhuing, rather. So that means you could probably have a little playable sequence where you go back with Zhuing and you learn counter elbow assault, you get the pendant, and then you go back into the
Sounds
game.
Amazing.
That would work perfectly. That's the sort of thing that I think could lend itself really, really well in a Shenmue 4 and engage new people. I think Shenmue 4 has to have a big story moment early, though. I think you have to establish that pace of story as quickly as you can, and it has to move things forward. I've said this 1,000 times in other videos. But Yu Suzuki's clearly passionate still about Shenmue. I think there was a worry in some corners of the communities that he might be sort of moving on to other things. But he seems as enthusiastic about Shenmue as he has done for even back in his sort of the barren stages. He was still enthusiastic about it. He's enthusiastic now, and all the time that he's wanting to do something with Shenmue, there's always a chance. It's just, can they find a way to do it that makes sense for WiseNet, makes sense for the vision, but also makes sense from a business perspective, which again is something we'll talk about later on. Coming sort of off the back of that a little bit is then Lucca Games. Now, Lucca Games, for anybody who doesn't know, and I have to confess, I had no idea what this was when it got announced. It was completely random and out of the blue, and Rio X had to explain to us what it was. It's essentially sort of the Tokyo Game Show of Italy, for want of a better expression. It's a massive video games and comic convention. It's held in November. And Yu Suzuki made an appearance. Mostly, I think, promoting Air Twister, but he also did a stream as well. What did you think of the appearance there? Were there any ulterior motive, perhaps, that he could have been out there and not just promoting Air Twister? What's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, well, it seems like he was just there for Air Twister, or perhaps he was like invited across there, maybe specifically for that interview, that live stream. Maybe that was like a big coup for the event to get Yu Suzuki there. But like you say, we've mentioned it before. It's interesting that he's speaking about Shenmue 4, Shenmue 0 with Esra, and then sort of the next month or a few weeks later, he's heading off to Italy. Which is like his only real big trip this year, as far as I'm aware. He's not been to any other game show, specifically Italy. So we have sort of speculated as the, some sort of a motive there for him to be going to Italy to sort of discuss. I don't know, or just meeting up with an in-games perhaps who are in attendance. So not much to say on that really, unless you have, Matt. But just. Who knows?
Yeah, it is one of those.
Yeah.
It is one of those who knows things, isn't it? I mean, because he went to TGS, he had a stream there with Esra at TGS. I think that was around September, October time, and then went to Lucca Games. So he's had sort of 2 trips out.
True. Yeah.
And at
TGS is on his
show,
doorstep, kind of.
Yeah, he's literally he can turn up when he likes, sort of thing. But to take a trip abroad, I said this at the time. I'd be surprised if he didn't talk business. I'm not saying Shenmue business, but talk business with somebody out there. I mean, it's a long way to go to do a stream and come home. I think he did some signings as well while he was there, in fairness. But it's a long way to go without that side of it, I guess. But also we know, and we knew this from Tokyo Game Show, that why doesn't it have another title in the works? So it could have been something around that as well. And talking with a publisher out there who could be ready to go on it. Who knows? So it's speculation, isn't it? It's not beat around the bush. It's complete speculation on everybody's part.
Whenever you see Yu Suzuki meeting up with someone, or tweeting in a picture we'll talk about like a little bit later as well, where he's pictured with the director of Virtua Fighter series at the moment or whatever, or you start to speculate. Obviously, it's like, why are they in a room together? Why is he with him? Is there something more to it? And that's basically kind of what we've got here with the Lucca Games thing, and that's all we're sort of speculating there. Is there something more to it? Probably not, but when we've got like literally nothing to talk about, you have to sort of talk about something, don't you? So there's always a chance, I suppose.
Yeah, and your mind can play tricks on you, but it's good to have something to talk about and get people just get people engaging in things and get some hype moving. And then that sort of leads us actually very, very nicely on. And this is quite a big one, actually, from I think quite a lot of people's point of view. Is again, I think this is around November time. Cedric Biscay, everybody who knows Cedric at EO knows Cedric. Was Shibuya Productions. He owns them. He was executive producer on Shenmue 3. Heavily involved in getting the Kickstarter going. A real community link is Cedric. I have a ton of time for him. I really like Cedric, and he doesn't beat around the bush. Cedric tells it as he knows it, as he sees it, and I respect that a lot. And this comes into his tweet here. So there was talk on Twitter about potentially crowdfunding Shenmue 4. I've done a couple of videos on whether that can or can't work, and I'm still on the fence about something like this. And Cedric spoke to me about that in the interview I did with him, which is nearly 3 years old now. That's which is insane, scary in itself. Scary. Really scary. But Cedric was saying that he felt it was really difficult to crowdfund Shenmue 4 again, and there are reasons for that in terms of momentum, in terms of also the issues around Kickstarter, rewards, expectation around it. There's many things around a Kickstarter that are potentially a challenge. But he then also alluded to that, from what I guess is his view and what he understands, is that Shenmue 4 currently isn't in development. They have all the pitching materials and they're still desperate to do it. Now, it's for some, that's almost a stab through the heart in terms of Shenmue 4, as far as we're aware, is not in development, which I can understand the concern around that. We are 4 years on at this point from Shenmue 3's release, but at the same time, they're still wanting to do something and clearly have an idea of what they want to do. It's tricky, this one, because I think half the community were like, oh my god, it's over, and the other half were like, well, it's nothing that we didn't potentially already assume, I guess. Where do you sit on it, James?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? We've had like Yu Suzuki talking about Shenmue, so everyone's spirits are high, and then Cedric sort of saying, I think it was Peter Wilson that just literally outright asked on Twitter, wasn't it, like, could we potentially kickstart Shenmue 4 if you're sort of in those stages where it's just a funding to get it over the line. Is that a possibility? So it's interesting that the wording, I think, from Cedric is strange. Like, to his knowledge, it's not in development, kind of a thing. So would he actually know, do you think? Would he know for sure, or is he out of the loop and he's off on his own doing his Blitz manga? And
that's tricky in itself, isn't it? And then that lends itself into going back to last year, the 110 Industries rumours and all that floating around, which Cedric, I didn't think, I wasn't particularly involved in something like that, or certainly had no knowledge of anything around it if there was anything going on at all. So I don't know how in the loop Cedric is, and that's not to sound disrespectful to Cedric at all. I think Cedric is giving what he knows at this point in time.
You think he'd be told, wouldn't you? Because he must still be involved. Like, if a Shenmue 4 is to happen, would he instantly become the executive producer or whatever? Or was that Shenmue 3 solely?
I mean, that's
a tricky one, isn't it? I don't know.
We don't know the arrangements for something like that, do we? And I would hope that, and we've said this quite publicly, that I'd love Cedric to come back and be involved in Shenmue 4, because I think he was that real vital link between the community, WiseNet, and everybody behind the scenes, and Magic Monaco, and having the opportunity to obviously go over there. Yu Suzuki was there every year from 2016 to 2019, and it was absolutely brilliant, and Cedric was instrumental in that. So you would think and hope that he had some pretty up-to-date knowledge of what's going on, but then it's hard, isn't it? Because Yu Suzuki does keep things very close to his chest. He will keep things very quiet, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, and this is very Shenmue, we look at the anime, Shenmue 3, announcements come out of nowhere.
I kind of love that, though, because everything else seems to get leaked, and then by the time it's leaked, the enthusiasm's been sucked out of the project, whereas at least with Shenmue, that what's the word, like a roof I can't say it. It's like EUPHORIC.
Euphoria.
That euphoric sort of that built Shenmue 3 at the time, didn't it? As soon as it was announced on the E3 stage, it was completely left field. Apart from the forklift tweet, it was like completely out of nowhere. Same with the anime, like you say, completely out of nowhere. The hype levels are off the charts because of how that's thingy. You've not had it sort of leaked and this is going to be happening. You know what I mean? It just sucks that, like I say, sucks the enthusiasm out of some people's projects when stuff gets leaked. So it's nice, touch wood, that so far Shenmue announcements are pretty much airtight. And like you say, that is probably down to Yu Suzuki in the way that he works. He doesn't really give hints to anything, does he? Even when he's talking to Esra here in the interview, he's talking about Shenmue 4, but he's not giving anything away at all, really, is he? It could be like,
absolutely nothing.
He's thinking about what he'd like to do in Shenmue 4, but there's no inclination whether or not he's actually talking that they're actively working on the project, or it's just some sort of his dream and hope that if he gets the chance to do it, that's what he'd like to do. He's like, no, we're sort of just in that middle ground of like, oh, it's nice that he's talking about Shenmue, but what's happening? So he doesn't give anything away at all. And perhaps that's the same with his relationship to Cedric. I don't know, until it's a done deal. Does he not get on the phone and say, Cedric, the game's coming along great, we're 70% done. Where does Cedric sit in all this? Is Cedric just sat there thinking like, I haven't had a text from Yu Suzuki for like 5 months?
It's
you assume it's not in development.
Yeah, it's very tricky, isn't it? And I would hope Cedric would be in the loop, but again, we just don't know. I think sort of coming off the back of that as well is then you look at, I think, the community reaction to it a little bit, and I want to talk a tiny bit about the community reaction to it. I think both sides of the coin are understandable.
Yeah.
There was an instant when I read it and I thought, oh no, like we've got a problem here, sort of thing. But the flip side of it goes, well, it's nothing we didn't already, I guess, know, and it doesn't really change anything in terms of what we're doing, in terms of the community, in terms of what we're looking to achieve. I just wonder a little bit whether it sort of wears at people who are probably a little bit battle worn, or the other side of the coin is the people who have probably sort of left it to chance around Shenmue and have then seen this and gone, oh, it's not happening, and that's it. And actually, that reaction to it as well. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. Like, if I was to go back to when Shenmue 3 released in 2019, you know, you're buzzing because the game's been released. You sort of get this sort of expectation that, oh, you know, eventually Shenmue 4 is going to happen, Shenmue 5, etc. We're going to wrap the series up now because it's back, you know, after all this time, it's back, and this is it now. We're on course to finish the series, like everyone's happy kind of thing. But I personally, as optimistic as I am, I didn't kind of expect to be sat here over 4 years later still wondering what's going on with the next game again, because we are, and I know you've sort of spoken about this quite heavily, Matt, but we are sort of reaching that point now where it is concerning, despite him talking about it a couple of months ago, despite what we know that they're pitching to publishers, so some sort of aspect of Shenmue 4 exists on a disc, on a computer somewhere. Shenmue 4 is a thing, kind of.
Yeah.
We're sort of sat here wondering, like, well, when's it going to happen? You know, are we going to be sort of stuck in this sort of time loop again where it feels like it's there, but it's not ever gets announced or nothing ever happens? Because we kind of had that from Shenmue 2 on the Xbox. It was like, it was never said outright cancelled. You know, there was rumours every so often about Shenmue 3, you know, it's time, it's happening, and then nothing happened. And then Shenmue Online, oh, it's, you know, more Shenmue, and then it doesn't happen. Oh, Shenmue City, and then it doesn't happen. And, you know, then the Kickstarter in 2015 where it did actually happen. And then 4 years later we got the game. We're like 4 years on from that again now, and we're sort of like back in that time loop again. It's we're just aging. I'm getting more grey, and we're no better off. So it's a strange predicament, but I am still optimistic because, again, it hasn't been cancelled. We've done it before, and Suzuki's still talking about it. At the end of Shenmue 3 with the credits, you know, he pretty much outright says it's his goal to get the next game.
Yeah.
You know, he knows. So he's not just handing out these empty promises. Suzuki's not like that. He's got his mind set on something. He just needs to find a way of getting it to happen. And currently, the roadblock is that there isn't a publisher actively wanting to support the project, whether or not because it doesn't make enough money. You know, it might make a profit, but it doesn't make enough of a profit for it to be worth the investment. Yeah. So that's sort of the concern. But again, as a community, we're always going to be pushing, and hopefully 2024 is perhaps the year where someone turns around and says, look, you know, there's been a gap between games, and I feel like, I know you're saying that like some fans are sort of done with the series because they think it's dead again or whatever. But then on the flip side, there's also like people that I think after it being 4 years are starting to wonder again. Starting to like, where I could see if there was a Shenmue 4 Kickstarter now, so much time has passed that I think it would get hype and buzz again. Whereas like so close to the end of the other one, people may have been a bit like, oh, another Kickstarter, you know, you Suzuki's just after money. But because it's been 4 years, it's clear that Shenmue isn't a cash cow. You know, it needs the fans to help to fund it again. And I think people would get behind it because it's been so long. It's, you know, it's clear that it needs the help. And I don't know, potentially that could be an area to look at. But obviously Cedric's also saying that crowdfunding isn't on the cards, you know.
Yeah, and he's got reservations around crowdfunding, as Cedric, and he's always been quite open around that side of it and the difficulties of it. And I think your point around a Kickstarter potentially getting more hype now is probably a good one, because more people will start wondering. Now, there will be some drop off for fans of Shenmue 3, and that happens inevitably. If people don't like it, some people will drop away. But bearing in mind, we will have got new fans as well coming through the door, and actually people are discovering the Shenmue series little by little by little. So you're getting these new fans coming through. Now, whether it's enough to make it profitable, I don't know. But you're going to get a natural churn in community anyway, and in fan bases, and it's just then whether it's enough to generate enough hype around it. And I've said this, I've said this a million times. I say it again. We're in the hard yards here. Yeah. We are in the real hard yards that we actually need to turn around as a community. Everybody needs to make the individual decision. Am I going to push for Shenmue 4? And if we're going to push for Shenmue 4, we need to leave everything behind it in terms of Shenmue 3, the Kickstarter, and that singular focus around Shenmue 4 on the continuation of the series. That needs to happen. Because that's how we got Shenmue 3. It was a singular focus. That said, if we look back since Shenmue 3's release, obviously between 2019 and 2020, there wasn't a huge amount of news. We had the Steam release of Shenmue 3. That was obviously always on the cards. Then in 2021, we got the announcement of the anime. I think it was 2021. It could have even been earlier than that. But we got the announcement of the anime. It might have been early that year. And then there was absolutely nothing for ages and ages and ages. And then sort of back end of 2021, we then got the announcement, the release dates, etc. of the anime. The anime released in 2022, and it finished its run sort of by the end of 2022, coming into 2023. So actually, really, in terms of barren periods of news, actual positive news, it's been about a year.
Yeah.
Which, given the time frame between Shenmue 2 and Shenmue 3 and the announcement there, it's not that long, really, in if I'm putting it in those terms. But I get the worry, and I think, like you, I didn't expect to be sat in this position again around what's happening with the fourth game. And I'm going on record in saying this, that if we're having this discussion this time next year, then I am worried.
I think currently the Shenmue 4 is sort of in a goodwill stage. Like, it needs people that love gaming, love what Shenmue's done to the industry, to, in goodwill sense, help get a Shenmue 4 produced. And then obviously you've got Josh Fair here saying that if Shenmue 4 happens, he will go out of his way to self-fund Shenmue 5 or whether that's an actual promise or not. But I think we are kind of in that thing where it's clear that it's not going to make a publisher an insane amount of money. It's going to make them, a decent profit, a small profit, but it needs that sort of goodwill that Shenmue did this to gaming. They changed games, open world games. So many things about Shenmue created what we know and love today, like Cyberpunk, what's happening with GTA, probably Red Dead Redemption. These sort of open world games that have got like time-based weather. These functions were all created first in Shenmue, so it's sort of like opened the doors to gaming. And I think because of that, companies like Sega's and whoever else feels like they owe something to Shenmue, to Yu Suzuki. That is sort of what I mean with the goodwill. I think maybe we are in that sort of goodwill stage where we just need someone just to say, look, Yu Suzuki, we love what you do. We've got tons of money. Here's 10 million. Go make Shenmue 4. We want to play it. We want to see it. Everyone wants to play it in the Shenmue community. And hopefully, you can tell the rest of your story that you want to tell and get the series finished off. That's what I mean. Goodwill.
Yeah.
There's so many people that want to see the end or the continuation of Shenmue that I think there's someone out there with the ability to fund the next game. Thinking about it in terms of like our lifetime, or what Shenmue has done to affect certain people like us, like John Lineman. There's so many names you could reel off that Shenmue's affected them, that if it never gets finished, and we've only got one life, sort of thing. So hopefully there's someone out there with a check, one of those big lottery checks, perhaps.
Yeah, that would be good, wouldn't it?
Hand it over to you, Suzuki.
Yeah, that would be cool. I think as well, like we talked about this in one of our podcasts, Yakuza versus Shenmue, and the series sales. And I, bearing in mind this isn't based off of solid numbers, because I've gone on what I could find in the research phase for the show. I averaged that Shenmue has done, does 500,000 copies average per game. So potentially you've got a market of anything up to that call that your ceiling. So surely if you get the right budget, if you can release it in a certain way, that market, that fan base can be tapped into, could be merchandised as well, and sensibly monetized, so that actually it can almost self-fund itself. We've talked about episodic Shenmue 4, which caused a bit of a ruckus. I still maintain it could work. I really do.
Too.
I stand by it, and I also think it could go digital only, and which means that more of the money is going to the publisher, and therefore the overheads drop down. So it's a tricky field, is Shenmue 4. I think it can be done. It's just then they've got to find the business model to do it, but also to allow the creative aspect of Shenmue and the story to thrive. And that's the difficulty. How do you do that with the fan base that we have? Because let's be honest, we are a very vocal fan base, we're a passionate fan base, but we're not a large fan base. And that is, I think, where people get stuck between the potential of Shenmue and what people want to do with it and would like to do with it, and what potentially is the reality of what they're working with in terms of marketing and the market they've got to go and tap into. Not to say it can't expand, and I believe it can be successful and expand, but you see the argument I'm making here, that it's a balancing act essentially. But if we go quiet and the Shenmue community stops, that will be it. That will be game over. And James and I will be in our 80s, in our retirement home, still campaigning for Shenmue 4, and probably a little bit pissed off that people stopped. But, it is what it is. Moving away from sort of the Shenmue 4 talk, and it was a big meaty one. We knew that was going to be the big meat of this show. Is earlier this year, much earlier this year, around April time. Although I was quite lucky to get my copy much earlier than that, as Adam Scipione shipped this out to me much earlier, and it's much appreciated, Adam and the team over there. A Gamer's Journey, the definitive history of Shenmue, finally is real, and it was in our hands. And I have to say, Adam Scipione and the team there at Definitive Films did an absolutely bloody brilliant job of it. I've watched it through at least 3 or 4 times since having the Blu-ray. I adore it. I think it's made with love, made with passion, and gives a real good account of the history of Shenmue and quite how important it was, and also the importance of Yu Suzuki and his gaming career and the impact on the industry. I adored it. I think it's brilliant. What did you think about it, James?
I'm with you. I think it was amazing. I think how it was designed, how it looked, so professional. It is literally like a documentary you'd watch on Netflix or something. And obviously it is available to stream. Don't think it's on Netflix, but it's available to stream on certain platforms if you haven't checked this out yet. Just an incredible sort of journey it takes you from talking about quite heavy on the Shenmue 1 side of things, a little bit lighter on the Shenmue 2. But then the build up into the Shenmue 3, that Kickstarter moment that got everyone so hyped, and seeing the sort of the fanfare, it's just amazing. And if you do have the physical copy, there's some amazing behind the scenes
brilliant
features
stuff
of Yu Suzuki going through his archival notebook of all the illustrations and the concept art. That's where we got those high res chapter tells from 1 to 7.
Yes,
Do you remember that map, which Shenmue fans wet dream to see that sort of stuff. So this documentary was nothing but good for the Shenmue community. And I mean, it's crazy that it happened this year. We were going through like all the news stuff, and we were like, oh, the documentary was this year as well. It's like, it has been quite meaty, but sort of on the fan side of things, like the community have sort of driven this year, I feel, despite the lack of news we got for Shenmue. But documentary on another level in terms of quality. It's, it shows how passionate Adam was to get that project out there, released and finished. Because obviously that went through a Kickstarter period as well that, went a bit hot and cold at some point. So it's nice to have that finally over the line, and it's out there for everyone to be able to see and witness now. And it's a great way of introducing someone, I think, to the Shenmue series that, if you've talked about it to your friends and they've not really got what you're saying, just sit them down, show the documentary, and, hopefully they can actually understand how we all felt when that Shenmue 3 announcement was made.
And that's a good segue into a point you made. I think when we reviewed this, you watched it with your wife, and I remember you said that she obviously gets that you like Shenmue, but now she really gets why you like Shenmue and where it comes from. The documentary facilitated that. I think that's a real good sort of arm to that documentary. Even if you're not a Shenmue fan, I think it can make or help people understand just why we are so passionate about this damn thing, and the impact it had on gaming, on people, and just everything. And I think Adam's team did a absolutely brilliant job with it. As you said, it's available for stream right now on a multitude of platforms. I think it's been on Amazon Prime in some countries as well. I think
Prime,
the UK
I'm pretty sure,
have had it. I think it's been on Apple TV. There's been some other streaming platforms that have had it as well. And it's not very expensive. It's only like £5, which is for a £5. If you haven't picked this up or you missed the Kickstarter, pick it up and stream it. I don't know what's happening with the spare Kickstarter copies or not. I know Adam was originally going to see if he could sell some of them. Some of them did end up in a physical shop near him in Canada. So that was pretty cool to see that some had ended up on a physical shelf as well. So that's cool. But we'll have to ask Adam whether that's going to end up, those other copies going to be sold off or whatever. And if they are, obviously we'll let you guys know so you can pick one up if you didn't back the Kickstarter already. But yeah, we'll move away from the documentary. Watch it if you haven't already, and we'll come into a little bit about Shenmue in gaming media a little bit here. So gaming magazines, invariably gaming magazines like to do their top ranked games ever, per decade, per 100 years, whatever you want to call it. There's been a few kicking around here. We've had Shenmue has been ranked in Empire Games, and it did pretty well for itself. It ranked at number 41. It was in the top 10 previously, but bearing in mind this was a long time ago, and you've had a lot of big games released since then. It was ranked in Edge magazine as well. I think it came in at number 63. And then Dreamcast Junkyard did their top 200 Dreamcast games of all time. Shenmue 1 came in at number 1. Shenmue 2 came in at number 7. Always good to see Shenmue in these posts and these polls, etc. Given that there's quite a lot of recency bias in terms of the games that are nearer the top of the list. Some games I can't believe were even in there. I think one of the lists didn't even have a Sonic the Hedgehog game in it or something, did it? It was
exactly
very Nintendo Zelda heavy, which nothing wrong with those games, but I think you're always going to get some sort of bias one way or the other. But from a media perspective and keeping Shenmue's name out there, how vital are these sorts of polls, and what sort of job does it do in keeping the name out there for us?
I do think it's good, because if you're going through a list like this and you're seeing like your Red Dead Redemption, these sort of titles that are big names in the industry now, and Shenmue is amongst them, I think that is an eye-opening sort of title that to some people they're like, oh, Shenmue, what's this? It helps to introduce people into the series. It can only be a good thing. And then they see, it's a title from 1999. So they kind of can set their expectations. Oh, it's available on the PS4. There's a modern remaster. I'll give it a go. And hopefully that is where we introduce new fans to it. That could be all it takes, someone just reading their Edge magazine or, seeing some sort of a ranking online. So I think it helps in terms like that. The Dreamcast Junkyard top 200, incidentally, was voted by actual fans. So it wasn't even like writers, like the Edge and the Empire magazine, or by the staff at the end of the day. So it depends on who's joined the teams since you said it was like ranked number 11 in a previous poll or whatever. So depending on who's come on there, you're getting a lot of Nintendo fans, perhaps that's where the bias comes from. But the DC Junkyard actually is people from the community who voted, and Shenmue's number 1. So it's good to see that even well, I mean, it's probably always going to be number 1 on the Dreamcast Junkyard, but it's nice to see that people are still heavily voting for Shenmue in the community. It doesn't lose its touch, does it? So I don't really know what else to say about that, but I just think it is a positive for people that are potentially new to the series to sort of discover Shenmue from reading these lists. You probably will get someone that's like, oh, I'm going to look through all 100 of these top 100 games and see what all the fuss is about. and obviously Shenmue's one of them. So,
and actually, sort of as a segue point into that as well, is when you think the Shenmue series these days, they're regularly on sale. Quite often, I think at the moment, I don't know when it ends, but there's a Steam sale at the moment. We can get all 3 games for like 11 quid.
Easily accessible, isn't it?
So it's really easily accessible for somebody at £11 to pick up 3 games, having read it in a magazine, going, "I'll take a chance on that," and then thoroughly enjoying it. Another fan, another community member, and it sort of can snowball from there. But I think you've touched on this very much so, in that it keeps Shenmue in people's minds. It keeps it in the news. It keeps people talking about it, and that then aids the community push. It then aids any push for publishers or anything like that. That people still know what Shenmue is. They still know the impact, the influence of Shenmue, and hopefully that then leads into how they promote, push whatever they want to do with the Shenmue 4. Theoretically,
that's what I kind of mean with the goodwill aspect. If the game is always in everyone's top 100 lists, there's enough about it surely to get another game. It's there for a reason. The series is there for a reason. I think the fact that it's even making these top 100 lists 20 odd years later, you've had 20 more years of gaming history to rewrite these lists, and Shenmue's still there. So I think there's enough there for someone with a bit of goodwill to. I sound very desperate there.
Get your hand
but
in
you
your
know
pocket,
what I mean.
basically.
Yeah, sort it out, guys. What are you doing?
Get your hand in your pocket. No, I see what you're saying. But then, moving away from people getting their hands in their pockets and funding Shenmue games, it seems that Shenmue fans are going to make their own game.
True, for free.
For free. Dreams of Saturn by George Kitchen came out just before Christmas. I think it was the 22nd or 21st of December. I can't remember the exact date. Right. It's had several revisions since then. George has kept on working on it, providing updates, etc. And James and I have been quite lucky that we've been working with him to make sure all the updates are there and just getting all the social media and all the launch out there. Shenmue Fangames have been going on a long time. You're talking 20 years in some aspects. When you go back to like the original Shenmue Zero and Shenmue Gaiden and all the rest of it, there's been a rich history of Shenmue fans. I'm thinking of Landisi here back in the day, messing around with the games, doing things with the games. And there's been projects that have fallen by the wayside. There's projects that are still being worked on, but are for whatever reason, there's been no real news about them. And then George, sort of in 3.5 months, releases Dreams of Saturn. It's set at Christmas. It's a prequel to the original Shenmue game. And I just have to say, what a job he has done on it. Stunning game. Real Shenmue vibe to it. What did you think?
I think it's brilliant. I've been playing it whenever I can play it. And I maybe go with an hour to spare. I've been finding myself playing it at 11 o'clock at night, thinking I'll play it for an hour until I go to bed, and then I've been staying up till 2 a.m. playing it because it's that good. It's come from a very passionate person, still striving to produce Shenmue content. George and Joe Kitchen, they're making music all the time. There's videos that they do, and then to come along and produce a game like this from someone like that, like George Kitchen, that is getting deep in the Shenmue lore. Making sure it's very detailed himself, because that is, that's Shenmue, in it. The detail is there for everyone to see in Shenmue's world, and I just think he's knocked it out of the park, really, considering it's only taken him 3.5 months to produce something of this quality, from him sort of delving into territories unknown, because I don't think he's worked with Unity before prior to this, so he's sort of been working on the job, and some of the stuff he's done with the mini games, the dialogue between characters, the cutscenes. I know we spoke about a little bit earlier with the Shenmue Zero. There's elements of that in there that it's nice. There's a very brief cutscene. You probably won't like me talking about this because it's something for people to discover, but we are a few weeks from it being released, so maybe I can talk about it. But seeing the scene where Iwau's actually fiddling in the basement, and it sort of zooms in on the comb, and it sort of makes it seem as though, he says Akane, it's Ryo's mother's name, and that's potentially her comb. And then he's also done not a playable flashback, but a flashback to Dreamcast where Rio's discovering the comb and he's like, oh, this is very beautiful, I wonder who used this, tying the knot sort of there. I love stuff like that. And I think the fact that you've got people that know the games inside and out, know the characters, these characters in there that they're utilising that I don't even know. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They found unused models of Perry. Perry, some of the characters that are there in the files, and creating new Shenmue characters, new Shenmue 1. Everything it's perfect. I mean, it's very much Dreamcast era level in the quality, and that's what they're going for. They're not trying to go hyper realistic with Unreal 5 or whatever it's called these days.
Yeah.
They want to make sure that we're getting a Dreamcast authentic experience. And I've just been blown away by it. I've been blown away by all the interiors they've designed. I've been jumping around trying to locate all the cassette tapes, the Chobu-chans, the Santa-chans, all of the flowers that he's dotted around the place. It's exploration off the charts here. If you want to just delve into Yokosuka, Dobuita, you just want to enjoy a Christmassy feel, a relaxed experience. It has really relaxed me actually playing it. Just going out hunting these things, hearing all the atmosphere of the birds, the dogs barking, the bike passing, the characters. It just feels so Shenmue. And I said this to you earlier, Matt, but for me, I've enjoyed it probably more than I've enjoyed recent games that I've played, like proper games like Sonic Superstars. I'm finding myself enjoying this little fan game, little in quotation marks, because despite him saying you can finish it in 45 minutes, I've probably spent over 10 hours on it at the moment, and I'm only about halfway through the game. So I think he sort of undersold the length of time, probably because he knows where everything is, but as you're going in fresh, trying to discover all the elements that he's included in there, the Easter eggs, the little nods to other SEGA properties as well, which is really cool. It's just a fantastic game. I probably would say if you really delve into it and go after everything, try and find every single thing that he's added in there, it probably is more like a 20-hour game, which for such a fan project, a fan-produced Shenmue title, it's got to be the best Shenmue fan project out there that you can play right now, anyway, in my honest opinion.
Yeah, and that's not to disrespect the others that have
come.
No,
not at all.
I think I think it's been very well received by the Shenmue community. I think everybody who's played it has been very receptive to it, been very understanding as well that it is a fan game, and have been quite helpful in picking up bugs and things like that as well. And George has been working his ass off, probably when he shouldn't be, quite frankly,
very true.
To squash as many of those post-release as possible, and that post-release support has been fantastic. I think it lends itself really well, the Shenmue world, to first person. I know he talked about it not being an artistic choice, it's almost a forced choice in terms of the animations, that he couldn't get them the way he wanted it to, but actually it works really well in first person. But they've got QTEs in there as well. They've animated like really cool cutscenes. The opening cutscene for it, as a Shenmue fan, you will adore it. Just we streamed it and we were both sort of sat there going, this is Shenmue. This is and it resonated a lot with us as well. And it's gone wider than the Shenmue community. Maximilian dude, who's a massive streamer on Twitch, was streaming it to over 10,000 people just before Christmas. And I think over on Twitter in the last few days, it's had nearly 100,000 hits around Dreams of Saturn on Twitter. Now, I wish we could track the stats on our website, and we will set something up for whatever comes next. But can you imagine if like 10% of those 100,000 have downloaded that game? That potentially 10,000 people, or up to 100,000 people could have downloaded that game. But there's been a real buzz around it, and that I know Maximilian is a big Shenmue fan anyway, so it's not a surprise that he picked it up and played it. But then to see it resonate outside the community is brilliant. It's heartwarming to see, and I think again it speaks to the volume of the quality of the work that's been done in the short space of time that it has been done. But I also think it reaffirms the Shenmue has something.
Yeah.
that people talk about it, that if you tap into it in the right way and create the right hype, that Shenmue can do something and resonate with gamers one way or another. And if this is just a short sort of string to the bow of that happening and potentially coming into other Shenmue games, other fan projects, whatever, then I'm all for it. The work that's been done has been nothing but short of fantastic. If you haven't played it already, the link is below. Make sure you download it. There are guides online now as well if you're getting stuck of how to pick things up. I know George put some hints in the games, etc. Has updated the map so things check off as you find them. Yeah, brilliant fan project. Download it, play it, and it's 15 to 20 hours of your time that are well spent.
All worth it, yeah. And it sort of touches back on an earlier point where we was suggesting like introducing people to Shenmue. This being streamed to that many people, 100,000 views on Twitter, like you're saying, Matt. If those people that haven't heard of the game are just seeing this fun, quirky fan game, and then let's try Shenmue. I'd like to see if Sega had a boost in original, Shenmue 1 and 2 things, and then you can tie that back to, and then that's only a positive, and that sort of reaffirms Sega's stance on fan projects in general. If something like this gets released and then all of a sudden they're getting sales for Shenmue 1 and 2, just overnight, like maybe 1,000 sales all of a sudden, whereas they were getting like tens or hundreds prior to that, then that shows that fan projects can have a positive influence on not only, certain titles, but also the IP as a whole. So if they release a future IP now, there could be more eyes on that, which I'm trying to segue you nicely there, Matt, into the next.
Yeah, it does. It segues into sort of A, our closing thoughts, and B, also, I think what's next. And we're not going to do it in the A, B order, it's just in my head that way. So, coming off of that, we then sort of close into Sega, and they've started reviving their old IP. I mean, at the Game Awards, I'd argue the announcement of the night in terms of 5 of their old IP are being revived. I mean, I say revived, I'm probably using that term a bit loosely when you think Streets of Rage has already had a real successful Streets of Rage 4 release already. But when you look at Crazy Taxi, Jet Set Radio, which, I felt for that community for years because they've been through the same crap that we have in terms of wanting a sequel. Granted, they've had probably more releases on other platforms in the intervening periods than Shenmue's had. And then you've obviously got Shinobi, which does look really cool, and Golden Axe have been revived, and they said more are on the way. So can Shenmue fit into that, do you think?
Potentially. I mean, you're naming certain titles there, and I feel like Shenmue as a brand for Sega is on the same level as them. Your Jet Set Radio, when you think of how many people out there know what Jet Set Radio is or are willing to buy a new Jet Set Radio title, I don't think the numbers are far off the same people that would pick up a new Shenmue title. So you can kind of talk about Shenmue in the same sort of breath amongst these titles like Streets of Rage, Golden Axe, Shinobi, Crazy Taxi. I feel like Shenmue, if not higher than those in terms of brand recognition. So whilst it's nice of them to go out of the way to support old IP, which is amazing to see, a new Crazy Taxi game, a new Jet Set Radio game. These are amazing for Sega fans. But yeah, I know Shenmue probably costs more than those to make, but in the same sense, the way that they're talking about those games is with a AAA budget. So how much they've spent on that, those titles, I'm not sure, or who's actually working on those games. Is it all in-house, or is it going to be off? I think .emu are probably doing the Shinobi title from what's happening there, but I don't know. I could see, I'd like to see maybe a Shenmue sort of come out of that, whether or not it's like what you said earlier with a remake perhaps, or even going out the way to do this Shenmue Zero idea with Yu Suzuki, or I don't know about Shenmue 4. That feels more like it's a WiseNet project, Shenmue 4, than a Sega project. But potentially the Shenmue Zero aspect could be something that Sega could look into with this sort of brand, new era, new energy revival of classic IPs, potentially.
I think, and I think Shenmue would be in that list. Whether it's nearer the top of the list, I don't know. When you think, I think there's been leaks since then around other IP that have been talked about coming back as well, and obviously Shenmue's not in that list. But there's so many old IP there with Sega that they could sort of knock out 5 at a time and start sort of chipping away at that list quite easily. Yeah. What I think is telling here is they have found ways to get these games made, bearing in mind, I don't want to pick on Jet Set Radio here, but I'm going to a little bit, because Jet Set Radio as a series has sold less than Shenmue 1 across all the releases they have had. Now, I know Shenmue 1 had the massive marketing campaign around it back in the day.
Huge budget.
But the series has sold less than Shenmue overall. I know Bomb Rush Cyberpunk has done pretty well, so it's probably given that side of things a shot in the arm potentially as well, could bring people through. But they have found a way to make these games from a creative standpoint, but a business standpoint. So they have found a way that is satisfactory, certainly in the predictions and the analytics they have done around the marketing and everything, to get these games and projects off the ground. So what excuse is there for them not to try and look at something like this for Shenmue? They may be looking at something like this for Shenmue, I don't know. But for me, and this then sort of feeds into the tweetathons and everything, which we'll come on to a bit later, is actually if we target Sega in some of our tweetathons, I mean, we've been quite active since they've announced that. Anytime they talk about these new games, what about Shenmue? What about Shenmue? Yeah. We've been pushing it. And that's what we need to be doing, because this is an open opportunity for us. We lose nothing by pushing Sega for this, especially if they've got this whole, reviving IP idea. Now, some people will go, Shenmue has been revived, and I take the point. Yeah. But there is also the brand recognition. There's also the legacy behind it, and then it sort of feeds in a little bit. I think the Virtua Fighter question. Now, Virtua Fighter was talked about by somebody quite high up at Sega America very recently, and saying, basically, with confirming through the back door, it's in development, but they're not quite sure how they want to present it. And they're talking about making it more flashy to compete with other fighters. And I don't think it necessarily needs to go down that road, because what made Virtua Fighter so great is it's very basic in its presentation, not to sound harsh, but actually the combat is so in-depth, so difficult to master but easy to pick up, that realism aspect and celebration of martial arts is key to it. So I think it would lose something of that. But then getting into my point is, back in March 2023, Yu Suzuki was seen with one of the directors of Virtua Fighter, Seiji Aoki. Is there anything in that? Could that then lead into a door for Yu Suzuki working with Sega again, which could then build bridges for Shenmue? Could that then lend into this new energy, new era thing that we're talking about? What do you think?
Yeah, well, it was strange, wasn't it, when Sega were handing out these blue cards to sort of hype up that something's going to be happening at the Game Awards, and they were going to fighting community people. So there was a lot of rumours and buzz at the time that what they were going to show was a Virtua Fighter 6. It just seemed like the opportune time. Going off that tweet, we've also had the Virtua Fighter release on a vinyl. That was early in the year, with a big interview with Yu Suzuki for that as well. We've had Virtua Fighter 3TB being re-released in Japanese arcades, so they've gone out of the way to create a whole new arcade machine for Japanese audiences for Virtua Fighter 3 of all. Just shows how popular the series still is, and that title in particular in Japan. And then that's been reintroduced into its either Gaiden or the upcoming Infinite Wealth map. You can probably tell me which one it's in.
It's in Infinite Wealth.
It's in Infinite Wealth, so you can actually play Virtua Fighter 3 there too, online as well, I believe. So that's really cool. Obviously, we had a little bit with that. Don't want to talk about it too much, but the NFT thing kind of came just after that tweet with Yu Suzuki and Seiji. So, Virtua Fighter's out there at least. The brand is, especially this year, now more than ever. Seems like there's a lot of talk, a lot of buzz for Virtua Fighter, and that's going to result in Yu Suzuki being involved in some sense, because obviously he's the creator of the original series. Shenmue is a Virtua Fighter RPG in a sense. It took over from the Virtua Fighter series and that. So whether or not a Virtua Fighter 6 is on the cards, I know you say that it's kind of been speculated or semi-announced that it's in development, but that would hit this list, like the plus more Virtua Fighter.
Yeah, it would.
Pretty much there. And then obviously that is again another positive for us, because like I just said, Shenmue is Virtua Fighter in essence, so we can help promote Virtua Fighter 6, get some sort of enjoyment out of the fact that Akira is Ryo, in an alternative dimension, and perhaps there's a chance then to be able to sort of say to Sega, well, why don't, because of the history with both series, why is there no Shenmue DLC in there? If they start doing what they did with Virtua Fighter 5 Final Showdown, whatever it's called, where they introduced some sort of Yakuza DLC or like Dragon DLC, you can play as a few of the characters like Kazuma and Majima.
Yeah.
Why is that not Ryo Azuki and Ren, or Landy, for example? Why can we not have skins for that? So that does give us avenues to sort of look at to help keep Shenmue in the limelight again. If a Virtua Fighter 6 does happen, we can promote Shenmue off of that, and hopefully that can only help the series as well. So that would be a positive, I think, for 2024 if something like that did come to fruition.
Yeah, I would agree. And Virtua Fighter again, I know they've had Ultimate Showdown, which was almost like a test of the water, if you like. Yeah. And then it just makes no sense. Did all this groundwork, Ultimate Showdown, the LP set, the Virtua Fighter 3 TB released in arcades. Bearing in mind, Virtua Fighter 3 TB, certainly the home ports have been maligned a little bit in some circles. The arcade version, I remember being blown away at it in like 1995, 1996, whenever it came out. I remember sitting there going, oh my God, this was insane.
Yeah.
Absolutely insane. So you wouldn't lay this groundwork without a plan for it. And I believe that plan is Virtua Fighter 6. And it's just very coincidental. And I said this in the video I did back in March, that why would the director of Virtua Fighter be meeting with Yu Suzuki? Now, they could just be friends, don't get me wrong. But it's very coincidental at that point in time, given Ultimate Showdown and the success that had as well. And then, as you say, we can promote Shenmue off the back of it, get some Shenmue DLC, and it could sort of bridge a gap further towards whether potentially Sega picking up Shenmue again. Who knows? We have to see. But then it sort of segues us into 2024, and obviously we want a Shenmue 4 announcement.
Yeah.
We've talked a little bit about, I think, our concerns if we don't get one or get some sort of real sort of idea of where things are going in the next year. But how can the community support Shenmue? What can people be doing on a not just monthly basis with the tweetathons, but on a daily basis? What should the community be doing?
Just striving, just keeping it out there. I mean, at the moment, the community is delving into this Dreams of Saturn. I think that is a good thing for the community at the moment. It's giving us more Shenmue, unexpected Shenmue at this time of year as well. It's nice to have something like that to talk about. I know the forums have been a bit buzzing as well, talking about Dreams of Saturn, which is nice to see. Get people back on the forums discussing the game, and on the Shenmue Dojo Discord as well. If you're not in there, you can hop into there and talk about the game. And George is quite active in replying to people. And then, as we mentioned, we do the tweetathons every single month on the 4th of every month. That is always something that you should be doing. And like you say, Mike, that can go beyond into daily. If we target Sega here with the new energy, new era stuff, try and get some sort of a reaction, I think, to get Shenmue's name back out there, and in Sega's thoughts, perhaps, whether or not, it's like you said, it's not necessary that we targeting Sega specifically to come out with more Shenmue. It's just an extra avenue. It's like, we might as well target them. They're doing something productive with their, old IP, and Shenmue is part of that, so it makes sense to sort of try and target that, and maybe we can get lucky, get something out of that. But yeah, these are the other ways, we can be targeted in games that they've been doing Air Twister. We've got a new WiseNet title on the horizon, whether or not that's an Apple exclusive or not. But that's something to look into and promote and help to sort of spread the word about that. And hopefully that can lead to Shenmue. Everything that we kind of do when we're discussing Air Twister, when we're discussing Sega, it's all with a hope that eventually it'll lead to the next Shenmue title. And I think as long as we cover all of that and everyone is on board, and as a community, we sort of help WiseNet as much as possible, and we sort of show to people like Sega and other companies that may be able to help with that, that publishing aspect for a Shenmue 4 or a Shenmue 0. I think we should strive and try and actively target as much as possible, because we kind of know what the deal is, right? Cedric sort of said there, look, there's a pitch there, Shenmue 4's out there in some form, we just need to find the right publisher. So we kind of know that is the roadblock in a sense. So Sega can publish it, it's their IP at the end of the day. In games perhaps a little bit too small for a project of Shenmue's size, but again, it's an alternative out there. The success of Air Twister perhaps could propel forward into something in the future. But these other companies out there, hopefully at some point we might learn about other interested publishers, who then we can sort of, say why, it's a good thing, like kind of did with 110 Industries, even though we didn't really know much about them. They were a relatively new company. We were still pushing towards that because it's a way of getting more Shenmue in a sense into, they were teasing whether or not there was anything behind that. It was someone to sort of target our frustration at, which is kind of what it is at the moment. We're frustrated that there's no Shenmue 4 at the moment. And I think if you target that frustration into anyone that could help, I don't think you'd be going too far wrong there. And if, we come up with a new way to target like we have done at the moment with Sega, give it a go. You never know. What about you, Matt? What do you think?
Exactly. And I think we've sat and talked about this sort of behind the scenes as well, that we're going to be taking a very... I don't want to use the term aggressive because it's the wrong word in terms of aggressive. Sounds like we're going to be shouting at everybody and calling all the names under the sun. It's really not like that. But any opportunity we get with Sega, we're going to be mentioning Shenmue everywhere. Any opportunity they tweet something, what about Shenmue?
It's so easy to do. Think about the things that happened back in the day when people were sending capsule toys to Sega's headquarters. That scale at the time is insane, really, when you think about it. When it's just a simple tweet these days is probably going to spike the same sort of a knee-jerk reaction from Sega if enough people do it. So where you're getting all these capsule toys showing up on their doorstep, social media's sort of taken over from that. Now we can send 100,000 capsule toy as a tweet in a sense. You could as long as we target to the right people. It's possible, I think.
It absolutely is. And I think once you create that buzz and it starts driving forward, then people start listening again. And we lose nothing by trying at the end of the day. And this is the reason we're going to take this more sort of proactive approach with it, and targeting Sega and targeting the other people out there, that any opportunity we get, we're going to mention Shenmue. That doesn't mean the tweetathons diminish. In anything, it helps the tweetathons. The hashtag Let's Get Shenmue 4, hashtag Shenmue Anime 2 absolutely helps them, and they happen on the 4th of every month. If for those people who haven't come across it before, we tweet on the 4th of every month, hashtag Let's Get Shenmue 4, hashtag Shenmue Anime 2, to make as much noise around Shenmue as we can. But it's in those gaps between the months. There's 30 odd days. Well, that's 30 odd days we can be hounding Sega or hounding whoever, and that's the approach we're going to be taking with this going forward. That any opportunity we get, we're going to be going for it, and we're going to be getting the name out there as much as possible. And the community, and what the community can do is look at that and go, let's get on board with this. Let's, we've played Shenmue 1, 2, and 3. We've played them to death. Whatever issues we've got with any of the games, whatever issues have arisen in terms of people dropping away, becoming passive, or downright not interested, come together and we can do this. If we stop, I promise you that will be game over. And that then James and I will be 80 in our retirement homes, very upset.
Very much so.
Very, very upset. But guys, as I said, target Sega every day, any waking moment you get, and I promise you it will make a difference. It will definitely make a difference. And like I said, the tweetathons on the 4th of every month, the whole community comes together with hashtag Let's Get Shenmue 4, hashtag Shenmue Anime 2, and let's see where we end up in 2024.
Can't do any worse, can it? If you silent, nothing's going to happen. So as long as you're vocal, you're kind of like an annoying gnat. At some point, you're going to be like, "Oh, go away." Do you know what I mean? It's you perhaps not the best analogy because that's like a negative response, but you know, you're out there.
You're going to get attention.
Showing your support. Yeah, you're going to get attention, aren't you? So I think it's doable. We've done it in the past. We can do it again.
Exactly, we can definitely do it again. And that sort of brings together the review of 2023. As James has said, it's been more of a community-driven year than anything else this year, but it's kept Shenmue going, it's kept the community going, plenty of content out there, and James and I will be putting out as much content as we can over the next year, on top of the tweetathons, on top of everything that we do. Obviously, there's the other community groups out there like Shenmue Forever, Phantom River Stone, Wandering Through Shenmue, No Context Shenmue, Shenmue DE. I've reeled off 5 off the top of my head just there,
and
but
more.
There's plenty more
like Sega.
Yeah, and more like Sega. Yeah. Plenty out there besides. So go out on the 4th of every month. Go out any day you can. Get Shenmue's name out there. And together, I promise you we'll get a Shenmue 4 or a continuation of the series in some way, shape or form. But to close the video off, before I say goodbye to everybody, I need to give some shout outs to our YouTube members. If you haven't joined us on YouTube, you can join for a couple of quid a month. It gives you early access to all of our videos outside the mainline podcast, which we keep as premieres because that's quite a nice thing that we do. And you get some emojis and other bits and pieces as well as a exclusive members only chat in our Discord group as well, where we will also look to run member only competitions as well. So that's another little sweetener for you. But for the members who have joined, I'm going to say read them out as we go. So there's 15 of you, so thank you very much, all of you, for joining. So Bruce Wayne 937, Survival Spears, Peter Hoffland, Sean Don, Wandering Through Shenmue, Phantom River Stone, Nova, Bruce Wayne 911, Mike Franz, Manny Figueroa, Master Mo, Nick Hughes, Sean Hastings, Clunky Mage, and William Lovering. Thank you for joining us and being a member. All the money that we get, that we monetize, goes into running the site, basically, because for the last nearly 3 years, coming up 4 years, it's been coming out of James and I's pocket, and it just helps us run the site, it helps us maintain our servers, and it helps us maintain the level of content that we want to produce for everybody. But
giveaways as well.
Giveaways and all the rest of it. Postage. But what I will say is it doesn't stop people accessing the content for free. You can still access all of our content without paying a penny if you so wish. But for now, guys, thank you for dropping in on the review of 2023. Here's to 2024. Hashtag Let's Get Shenmue 4. Hashtag Shenmue Anime 2. Sega, we're coming for you. But it's a goodbye from me.
It's a goodbye from me.
Take care, guys. Have a good one.